started.
Hi, this is Mark Dunley, and I am co-chair of the EcoAction Committee of the Green Party of the United States. And I want to welcome you to this forum on biodiversity and the rights of nature. We will be hearing from three panelists who will be introduced in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. We'll start with Frederic Guarino of the Green Party of Canada, who's also a member of the Biodiversity Commission of the French Greens. Tierra Curry, who is the Saving Life on Earth campaign director with the Center for Biological Diversity. And Natalia Greene, who is the global coordinator and co-founder of Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. As most people know, world governments met last month in Montreal to set global standards on how countries can deal with the issue of protecting biodiversity. We, of course, unfortunately, are losing many of the species on the planet and losing much of the habitat that allows species to thrive. The U.S., however, has not signed on to the United Nations Convention of Biological Diversity. COP15 in Montreal adopted a plan to protect at least 30% of nature on our planet by 2030. The rights of indigenous peoples and their contributions to the conservation of biodiversity were recognized. Biodiversity is essential for the process that supports all life on the planet, including humans. But without a wide range of animals, plants, and microorganisms, we cannot have the healthy ecosystems that we rely on, which provide us with the air we breathe and the food we eat. So each of the panelists will give about a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll be opening it up for questions. I will mention that one of the things the EcoAction Committee does is that we help promote Earth Day to May Day and try to encourage people to do events to draw the connections between climate change, between environmental issues, between workers' rights, between immigrants' rights, and certainly things like biodiversity and rights of nature. And we'll be doing another webinar on April 10th to sort of kick that off. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Ningay, who is one of our national co-chairs, and he's going to introduce our speakers.
Don't forget to go to speaker mode.
Oh, and I am not seeing Tony at the moment. Lizzy, would you be able to introduce our co-host? I'm sorry, our panelists.
Yes, so we have three eminent speakers this evening, and we have Frederic Guarino from the French Greens and the Green Party of Canada. And we are going to be introducing the speakers one by one as they come up. We have Tierra Curry, the senior scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity. And we have Natalia Greene, the co-founder of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And are we going to have Frederic come first?
Frederic goes first, yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through
Frederic, I'm going to give your bio before you start while you're getting your screen ready. Okay.
All right.
Frederic Guarino is from the French Greens, Green Party of Canada, a member of the Biodiversity Commission of the French Greens. He is launching the Global Greens Biodiversity Working Group as a follow-on from the Global Green meeting of the Green elected officials present at COP15 CBD Montreal. He co-led an online Green Action Zone, which showcased biodiversity research and case studies, including reforestation and water access. Frederic founded Climate Action Works within the Peace Innovation Institute at The Hague and is lecturer on climate and biodiversity action. That's System Dynamics Society, McGill Environmental Society, and University of British Columbia. Frederic pivoted from tech analysis and future casting to climate action, SDG, ESG, and focusing on pro-social behavior at scale through the use of technology. Welcome, Frederic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So COP15 came out as Mark said, with this biodiversity framework for the entire world, save for the US, who was there in an observer status, but is not an official signatory. But all of US business interests were there. So civil society was very well represented. And what came out is that we're going to do everything we can to save, as you said, 30% of nature by 2030. I just want to remind everybody, it is 82 months until 2030. So it is all hands on deck. I'll come back to that. So Climate Action Works is part of the Peace Innovation Institute, and our work is to be a catalyst of successful ongoing climate and biodiversity action, because there's a lot. We want to spotlight leaders to accelerate change, and we want to be a beacon for forward-looking research. Climate change is a primary driver of biodiversity loss. This is a quote from Elizabeth Mrema, who led the Convention for Biodiversity before being promoted at UNEP. Yet that same climate change depends on biodiversity as part of the solution. So the two are linked and cannot be separated. This is a very important point that was made, thankfully, at COP15, because for well understood reasons, climate was getting all the attention, and biodiversity, as we know, Aichi in 2010 came out with very well thought out goals that none were met. So we cannot have this happen again. The fact that we're linking biodiversity and climate, to me, is a very interesting and necessary wake-up call. So what did I learn at COP15 in Montreal? Well, the fact that we had so much of civil society, the fact that finally we're recognizing indigenous nations as the stewards of nature it's past time, but it's still time to accelerate their role in doing what must be done. 80% of the global biodiversity that we aim to preserve in 82 months is tended by the indigenous nations, and they represent less than 5% of the world's population. And as we know, they have access to not enough funds. So it is a question of directing funds, directing action, and showing that we cannot wait. Things are already in motion to protect species, to protect nature. And again, it's all hands on deck. So we have 82 months. That means that we are working to connect different clusters of forward-looking actors, academics, people in business that are not greenwashing. There are some, thankfully. Engineering schools that are looking to retool their programs to be able to serve these global needs. That's why we're working with the Global Greens as well. And what's interesting is that people like IEEE, so IEEE sets the standards for engineering schools and everything in the technical world. And they have a wonderful initiative called Planet Positive, where they're cutting through a lot of red tape, as it were, in their cluster to put this front and center. We're also working with network of networks like the Transboundary Groundwater Resilience, because climate, biodiversity, the two being so linked, one of the fundamental building blocks for the 2030 SDGs is water access, water security. We're going to go through more episodes of drought in North America, in South America. Chile right now has undergone fires like they have never seen. And we already can forecast, it's being forecast right now, that the drought in Europe is going to be severe this coming summer. Last summer was bad. This coming summer is going to be worse. This means that system thinking needs to be in place. And that's what myself and folks I work with are endeavoring to make sure is clear to decision makers, both on the business side and on the political side. Even though I'm a member of two Green parties because I have two nationalities, I'm French and Canadian, French citizen and Canadian, and I work with both parties. We're very clearly past the time to just talk amongst ourselves, and we must work with everybody in the political arena. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight, and hopefully questions will come so that we can go forward. And again, all hands on deck for action all the time, everywhere.
Well, thank you. We are going to have Lizzy introduce the next speaker. I do want to apologize in that for some reason the chat is now being allowed to be shared to everybody. We are trying to work on that. And there will be, as I said, questions and answers. They'll be after the three speakers. But Lizzy, can you introduce our next speaker?
Sure, Mark. I'm so sorry we're having some tech troubles. Tony was going to do it, but our next speaker, we're so excited to have Tierra Curry, is senior scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity. As a conservation biologist and the Saving Life on Earth campaign director, her job is to help save plants and animals that are at risk of becoming extinct. Tierra is building a movement to end extinction. She works nationally with individuals and groups in support of celebrating and protecting biodiversity. Her work combines environmental policy, science, and public awareness, which includes researching, writing, campaigning, media relations, public speaking, and online and community organizing. Prior to joining the center in 2007, Tierra worked as an amphibian field biologist, environmental educator, and community organizer. Tierra holds a bachelor's in English from Berea College and a master's in biology from Portland State. Tierra grew up in the Appalachians of Kentucky and engaged in a campaign where she swam in 108 rivers to highlight water issues, which is very exciting. Take it away, Tierra.
Can you see the screen with the frog on it? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So thank you so much for having me. I survived the 108 rivers, so I'm here to talk to you tonight. I am a conservation biologist at the Center for Biological Diversity. I use she pronouns, and I am on Shawnee land on the Cumberland River in Kentucky. The Center for Biological Diversity is exactly what its name implies. We're a nonprofit that work to save endangered species and the habitat and climate that they need to survive, because we think that every species has the right to be here and is important to human well-being. So what is biodiversity? I gave a talk one time, and at the end of it, someone raised their hand and they were like, I don't like animals anyway, so what's the point? And I realized that I should start every talk with what biodiversity is and why it's important. So my favorite definitions of biodiversity are the ones that include relationships. So it's all the living beings that we share the planet with and the connections between them. And we're just one species on this planet. We like to forget that, but we share the planet with at least 8 million other amazing beings. And our well-being is completely tied to theirs. So why is saving biodiversity important? Well, I think extinction is unjust in that every species has the right to be here. Every species also tells the story of a place. So when we lose that species, it means that we've changed that place forever. Some of my favorite definitions are from Lincoln Brower. He was a famous monarch butterfly biologist. And when people ask him why saving the monarch butterfly was important, he would always say, well, why is saving the Mona Lisa important? Just implying that the species is so beautiful and it has artistic value and aesthetic value and more than just value as a pollinator, which it also has. And then Phil Peister, who was a famous fish biologist who unfortunately passed away very recently, he single-handedly saved a desert fish from extinction. Its spring was going to dry up. He put it in buckets and moved it. It's still here to this day. But when people ask him why saving that little desert fish was important, he said, well, what good are you? Which just goes back to every species has the right to be here. So scientists like to talk about ecosystem services, so do economists. People who are really on the side of every species has the right to be here get kind of irritated when you talk about ecosystem services because they don't want to talk about what species do for us, but we wouldn't be here without them because of pollination, water filtration, climate stability, soil cycling, all of the things that happen for us that enable us to be here on the planet. But also, I think that it's important to remember the cultural services that nature provides about our stories, our identity, our language, how we see each other in the world. All of these have a background in nature. So things are a mess. You probably already know that, or you wouldn't be on this webinar. We're in the 6th extinction in the history of Earth. What's driving it? E.O. Wilson, the famous conservation biologist, used to use the acronym HIPPO, but now it's CHIPPO because climate change is magnifying all of the other threats, which include habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, human population growth, and all the stuff we use all the time, and just direct exploitation. There are several super depressing global indices. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. They're trying to assess the state of everything on the planet. The premier one of those is the IUCN Red List. The International Union for Conservation of Nature is an umbrella group of other groups. The Center for Biological Diversity is one group in that umbrella group, trying to assess the species status of everything on the planet. We've done 150,000 species so far. The news isn't good. Of those, 28% are in an extinction risk category. So the United Nations Environment Program took that 28%, rounded it down to 1 in 4, looked at the number of species on the planet, and came up with 1 million species that are at risk of extinction. And that's extrapolated from species we have an assessment for. 56% of data deficient species are also thought to be in a threatened category. So this is a conservative estimate. Another very depressing global index, the World Wildlife Fund, which is now the Worldwide Fund for Nature Living Planet Index, they looked at populations of vertebrates that are counted. So animals that we actually have population data for. And this is populations, not species. They found that vertebrate populations on average have declined by 68% since 1970. And if you look at why, human population has doubled since 1970, but the economy has grown tenfold since 1970. And if you just look around, you don't need all of these global indices to see what's happening. Once common species are declining: frogs, fireflies, whippoorwills, bats. Here in Eastern Kentucky, I grew up surrounded by all of these things, and now I don't see them. I have to go looking for them. A lot of people like to think that extinction is something that's happening somewhere else, but the United States has already lost 650 species to extinction. A study came out just last week where NatureServe, which is an index of all of the state natural history data, found that 40% of animals and ecosystems in the United States are in an extinction risk category. But it doesn't have to be like this. Extinction is a political choice. I stole that from an Australian senator who said that when the Bramblecay melames, this cute little animal that you see, was the first mammal to go extinct due to climate change impacts alone. And when that happened, that's what she said. And it kind of rocked my world. Extinction is a political choice. We can make a different choice. One tool we have in the United States is the Endangered Species Act. This is its 50th anniversary. So many animals are still here because of the act. 99% of the plants and animals on the endangered species list are still here, which is an amazing success. More than 100 species have either been removed from the list due to recovery or downlisted. There are other legislative pieces in play that we have to push really hard for. The Recovering America's Wildlife Act would provide $1 billion in funding. It didn't make it in the last Congress, even though it has bipartisan support. Hopefully we can push it through this time because it will provide funding to study all the non-charismatic species that make the world go round. The Extinction Crisis Emergency Act would direct all of the different parts of government to prioritize rebuilding wildlife populations. The Extinction Prevention Act would provide funding to recover the most endangered groups of animals. And then other pieces moving through are the Environmental Justice for All Act and the Global Health Empowerment and Rights Act. It's super important to push for policy solutions, but there are also things that we can do as individuals because the cumulative mass of 8 billion individuals has created this mess. So our individual actions do add up. cutting meat, keeping your cat inside, planting native plants in your yard, not using pesticides, avoiding plastic, all of these things could help. There's 63 million acres of lawn in the United States. That's ridiculous. That has so much potential to restore wildlife populations. We all also have to be intersectional environmentalists. We have to mainstream biodiversity protection and environmental protection and not silo it and think that it's something that biologists do or that environmentalists do. Everybody has to do it, and all injustice and justice is intertwined. So the things that are destroying the planet are also making frontline communities even more vulnerable and exploiting people too. So when we fight for any of them, we're fighting for all of them. And if you want to take action on specific policy items on our website, we have hundreds of action alerts that you can take. biologicaldiversity.org/action. You can sign up and we'll email you when these things come up so that you can contact your senators and representatives. And I don't say that lightly. I live in Kentucky. My senator is Mitch McConnell, right? So I know how I love pestering him, basically. And with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Natalia. I can't wait to hear what about rights of nature.
Thank you so much, Tierra. We're going to have a Q&A that I'm sure our participants are going to want to ask you a lot of questions. Natalia Greene is co-founder and the global coordinator of GARN, the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. Former president, now vice president of SEDENMA, coordinator Ecuadorian of Organizations for the Defense of Nature and the Environment. Natalia is a climate activist, grassroots organizer, and was a central figure in the historic inclusion of rights of nature within the 2008 Ecuador Constitution that specifically recognized nature as subjects with rights, as well as the role of indigenous people and the responsibility of civil society. She has coordinated the program Political Plurinationality and the Rights of Nature at Fundación Pachamama. She has worked intimately in developing Ecuador's remarkable indigenous Yasun ITT initiative, aiming to keep oil underground in the Amazon region. Natalia holds a Bachelor of Arts from Hampshire College, Massachusetts, a Master's in Social Sciences from Flasco, Ecuador, and a Master's in Climate Change and Sustainable Development from UASB EC. She is a member of the legal team for the recent successful and precedent-setting rights of nature case of the Ecuadorian Los Cedros cloud forest against mining interests. She is featured in the 2021 documentary, Green Justice, Can the Law Save the Planet? Natalia Greene is a member of the Secretariat of the International Rights of Nature Tribunal. She is an expert with the UN Harmony with Nature Initiative Network. And I'll have a quote from that. The United Nations Harmony with Nature Initiative speaks to the need to move away from a human-centered worldview, or anthropocentrism, and establish a non-anthropocentric or an earth-centered relationship with the planet. Under this new paradigm, nature is recognized as an equal partner with humankind. Welcome, Natalia.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those previous talks, and I'm really thrilled to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about how we have reached the moment where we are with the Rights of Nature movement. And I want to start my talk with this idea of the rights of nature, a movement whose time has come. We created the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature back in 2010. And we remember quoting Victor Hugo in this quote, it's an idea whose time has come. And we were thinking that that was the time back in 2010, and we were wrong. It took a while until this movement started to move faster and faster. And actually last year, we met with a big group of our allies with the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And we said, well, we've been carrying this block up the hill, and this block, or this big heavy ball, has started running by itself. Because definitely it's a movement whose time has come. It's a movement that is a growing movement, and it's pretty much blowing up in the whole world. I like to call it as a world acupuncture, because it's coming up and really appearing in many parts of the world, and I'll tell you how in a minute. The right of nature is an emerging powerful movement to transform human consciousness, to redesign that failing concepting economic social structures and create a framework for living in harmony with nature, grounded in the recognition of the rights of Mother Earth. Here in this picture, we are at a gathering celebrating the 10th anniversary of the rights of nature inclusion in Ecuador. This year, we're actually celebrating the 15th anniversary of this inclusion. The rights of nature is definitely a necessary new paradigm, because environmental law is not enough. We have seen that environmental law only does what slavery used to do with the slaves. It's telling companies and it's telling people how much you can damage a river, how much mercury you can put into the water. It's not telling, do not damage the river, do not cut the trees, do not pollute the water. So we need a new paradigm, a complete new paradigm that establishes that nature is not an object that you exploit, is a subject that you protect. And that's a whole different thinking, where you bring nature into the negotiating table and you start treating nature as an equal. And that changes things dramatically. So we were able to do this back in 2008 in our constitution. We were able to recognize that in Article 71, the nature Pachamama, where life is created, has the right to exist, to maintain its natural cycle, and to thrive. This new paradigm started in Ecuador in 2008. And as you can see here in this map, this is a map of Ecuador, and you can see it's great biodiversity. This area of the Amazon is like where most of the biodiversity is focused. However, even now, 15 years after the inclusion of the rights of nature, governments still think of Ecuador like this, like a set of oil blocks and mining blocks in conjunction with protected areas. And so that it's not an easy story. It's not, but it doesn't mean that we have failed. The inclusion of human rights like 60, 70 years ago was not worthless. You know, we know that in the world we have not been able to recognize and guarantee all human rights, but it was definitely worth recognizing that human rights have rights, and humans have rights. And of course, now is the moment to recognize that nature has rights. If you see this timeline, we have as I was saying, a very big growing movement. Back in 1972, we started with that famous article from Christopher Stone, "Should Trees Have Standings?" And now the movement has grown pretty much, it has grown a lot after our constitution, but I can tell you that we're talking with the US. It was actually the US in Tamaqua Borough, a small place in New York, in the US, where there was an inclusion of an ordinance that guaranteed the rights of nature. And this is what happened in 2006. It was the first time that it was included into public policy, and now it's going everywhere. So as I was saying, we were able to create the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature in 2010. It was right after this conference in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where the Universal Declaration for the Rights of Mother Earth was enacted, and that's like a policy that we use in a lot of our work, especially in the rights of nature tribunals. Now we have been able to grow with GARN with many different hubs in Africa, in Latin America, in Europe, and also many thematic hubs like a legal hub and academic hub. The academic hub actually just launched an eco-jurisprudence monitor that you can find on our website, and you can see there how these 37 countries have adopted the rights of nature, and there are actually 42 countries that have adopted eco-jurisprudence that have eco-jurisprudence cases. So now it's not only Ecuador that guarantees rights of nature in the Constitution. Unfortunately, we're still the only country that has it in the Constitution. We were about to have Chile, but that failed last year. However, we do have 37 countries that have either an ordinance or have recognized the right of a river, have a successful case of rights of nature. What we have done with the rights of nature is really made it normalize the concept through these ethical rights of nature tribunals. We have developed tribunals in Quito, in Lima, in Bonn, in Paris, in Europe, in Glasgow. And these tribunals have really made a difference because we have chosen very amazing judges from all over the world to talk about issues that concern us, like the one we have here in Glasgow, the fast solutions to climate change and the Amazon as a living entity, recognizing that, you know, everything is connected, that if we don't recognize that the Amazon is a living entity that is threatened, and if we don't find the real solutions for climate change, we're never going to be able to guarantee the rights of nature. Here in Ecuador, I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. This case that we actually work with you, Tierra, with the Convention for Biodiversity. We wrote an amicus curiae for this case, and we're actually working here in Sedema still with this case of frogs versus mining, intact versus mining. These two frogs were rediscovered in an area that is threatened by mining in the province of Imbabura in Ecuador. And these two frogs, this one, the Ectopolosus confusus, its name was changed to the Rana cohete resistencia because it's the resistance frog. These two frogs are not considered in the environmental impact study. However, we're fighting for these frogs and their rights to try to stop a large-scale mining provoked by the with a concession from the Chilean company Codelco. So we actually have the judges coming onto the territory next month, and we are continuing with this really emblematic case. This is another case where we actually work with you guys as well. That was the case of Los Cedros. I bring this case up because it's a really amazing case. We were able to have a historic victory in favor of nature, where the Constitutional Court was able to state that no activity that can threaten the rights of nature can be developed in an ecosystem like Los Cedros. That is why any mining and other extractive activities is prohibited in Los Cedros. And right now, this forest that is the home of frogs, spectacled bears, spider monkey, birds, has won a really unprecedented battle for the rights of nature. So it is true, in Ecuador, we have not been able to stop extractivism in general, but we have right now 56 successful cases of rights of nature in Ecuador. And this has really changed the attitude of people. I feel that it's really important to say that when you change law, you start changing people's perspective. And that's really what's more interesting, because when you talk here in Ecuador, you have social movements really empowered by the idea that nature is a subject of rights. And if they're not being guaranteed yet, then we need to fight for their guarantee. And that's a completely different paradigm where we need to be aiming for. So I'm going to move fast in this part. I think that it is very important to recognize what was also recognized in COP15 in Montreal. That is the idea that rights of indigenous people and their contributions to the conservation of biodiversity need to be recognized. And we have always been doing this with the recognition of the rights of nature defenders. So these recognitions in Montreal go hand by hand with our with what we have been talking with the rights of nature. In COP15, I think it's very important to also mention, if you see the agreement page 5, it says that the framework recognizes and considers these diverse value systems and concepts, including those countries that recognize them, rights of nature and the rights of Mother Earth, as being an integral part of its successful implementation. So actually, COP15 in Montreal already included the idea of rights of nature. Unfortunately, only, of course, is including it as for those countries that consider them, but it is important that we see international treaties already including the idea of rights of nature, and of course, if we can guarantee the rights of nature and also the goal of guaranteeing and protecting 30% of nature's biodiversity by 2030, then we'll be giving a very big leap towards the conservation of this very threatened diversity. With the rights of nature tribunals, we have also done alerts. For example, this alert of the Great Nicobar Island leatherback turtles. We relaunched this alert during the CVD because of the importance of this giant leatherback that is also threatened in India. And that's also one of the goals of the tribunal, to bring out threats about these species and how their rights are threatened. And with this, I'll just stop just to say that the call to action is, of course, to join the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, to support the tribunals. We're doing a tribunal coming up now in Mexico for the Tren Maya that is being built on top of the cenotes and threatening the jaguars and the caves and the Mayan people in the Yucatan Peninsula. We're visiting Vaca Muerta in Argentina because of the fracking that is happening in Neuquén in the Patagonia. And that our tribunals have been a very successful way to really visualize how this system is really a war against nature. So here's my contact, and it's been a pleasure to be sharing this information with you guys and to share this amazing growing movement of the rights of nature.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure if Liz is going to help us a little bit of a transition. I know some people have been saying they only saw the slideshow. It's small. We won't be having more slideshow at this point, but there's a view button at your top, and you may need to adjust the view to get the view to make it look the way you want. Lizzy, did you have anything you want to add at this point?
Oh, I just wanted to thank the speakers. We did put in the chat the action items and links to this information they gave. And when we post this to our YouTube, we will make sure that that information is included too, so people can take action. I think Tony Ndege is able to speak with us now. He was originally going to intro the speakers. I think maybe he wants to say hello and maybe help us with some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzy. Greatly appreciate this opportunity. Thank you all for coming to this wonderful event. I'm not going to talk very long because I really want everyone to participate in the Q&A if possible. I just want to say, as a national co-chair of Green Party, one of the 7 national co-chairs, I just want to give you all a welcome here, and just want to thank you for coming to this event. I wish, as a fellow activist as well, probably much longer than I've been a Green, I hope that everyone can take from this and put it into action, whether it's action in your hometowns, actions to get this information to your elected representatives, and also to join us and become a sustaining member, or to become a member of EcoAction Committee, which I'm also a member of. So I want to thank Lizzy and Mark for helping to put this event together. Thank you all for being here. I'll send a couple of links if you'd like to join EcoAction, just to let you know how to do that, as well as if you'd like to become a sustaining member or participate with the Green Party in any way. So thank you very much.
So there is a Q&A. People can list their questions in there. I do think we've corrected the chat, as people seem to have indicated. So if you want to chat with anybody, everyone, you can do that now in the chat. But we're going to open it up to questions and answers at this point. I thought, Lizzy, did you write up a question or two you wanted to share with people?
Yes. A few people got together with a few questions, and I'm sorry, Tony, for not introducing you. We've had tech troubles and it's gotten a little scrambled. But the first question will go to Frederic. A lot of Greens are interested in what occurred not only in the COP15 official proceedings, but also in the green space that you created, and what kind of questions and dialogue and what's coming out of that? So
Catherine Heyjo, who's also Canadian and a longtime activist, has been saying something very interesting ever since COP26 and COP27 on the climate. And she said that for everyone saying that the COPs are dysfunctional, they have become the primary tool that we activists use to connect with each other. So that's why we set up with the Global Greens, Peace Innovation, and other partners this online Green Action Zone, because we felt many people were not going to be able to come physically, but wanted to congregate together. So it was an online meeting space called Bramble that we used, where you could network, unlike you do in Zoom more easily. So that came out as a real success in getting people from pretty much every continent on Earth connected with each other. What we featured were case studies of action on the ground. For instance, we had water activists on both sides of the border, one who's a Mohawk from the Great Lakes region of Canada, and her cousin who's in New Mexico. And both of them are indigenous nations members, and they're working every day to make sure that their nations have water, which is not a given. It should, but it's not. So that was part of the research and activism that we featured. And I'll close in saying that the other parts that we wanted to make sure were first and foremost were research for what we have to do, which is, and yes, Lou, water is a human right, research to prepare us for what we must do, which is adapt. There is a really interesting institute in Africa called ILRI, the Institute for Livestock Research, and what they're doing is tremendous. It is preparing our livestock in the global north for aridity and water stress. So it's UN funded as well as privately, and they're doing all this work a little bit behind the scenes. So what we're aiming to do, and I welcome everybody to connect with me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll also, of course, post my email in the chat. Please connect. I'm looking for like-minded activists everywhere who are surfacing great work being done that can be replicated. Power of example. And in answering other things that seem mundane, I'll just share my screen a bit for a second and show power of example, what we did in Montreal last year. Hopefully you could see this. This is on the asphalt right behind my house, where we turned the street into a garden. This should be done everywhere for two reasons. One, it's easy. Two, it sends the powerful signals that we have agency in this world and we can change it very easily to make it more human and more in tune with nature.
So I wanted to throw out a question. I do a lot of my work these days on climate, and climate threatens the future of humanity. But people have pointed out that obviously climate change is very critical, but the extinction of species is a sort of separate but related issue to climate, that just solving climate change is not necessarily going to solve the problem of extinction of species. I was wondering if any of you wanted to respond to that. Just
If it's okay, I can try to respond to that. I love that debate about biodiversity and climate change. When we talk about like the planetary boundaries, we have exceeded the planetary boundaries both on climate, when we talk about the atmosphere and climate change, and biodiversity and its extinction. And I love to actually make the connection between biodiversity and climate change, because as you saw, we are really fighting against mining in places like Ecuador and in the global south. And many people that are only concerned about the climate crisis keep on saying that we need renewable energies that are actually like based on a lot of like minerals. And we need to come up with like better solutions. I'm not saying no to renewable energies in any sort, but I'm saying that we need to come out with better solutions and understand the whole cycle of renewables and the whole energy transition, because what it implies is that here in the global south, we have threatened species because of that energy transition. So we need to look at the problem as a global environmental and biodiversity crisis, and we cannot separate both debates. So that's what I love the rights of nature paradigm, because then is when you think about nature as a subject of rights, then you cannot separate what's happening to the planet and its climate and what's happening to the species.
If I can echo this before, I'd love to hear from Tierra. There is research being done right now to do what must be done for renewables mining a different way that is non-extractive. It's called phytomining. Very few people know about it because it's still in the sort of lab phase. But my job with the Institute is to surface all this stuff so that we can accelerate the piloting, because the research is there. It's been in the works for 20, 25 years. And phytomining is basically mining through plants. So basically what you do is you plant above where mineral deposits live. And instead of digging a hole in the ground, the necessary minerals are basically almost magically by nature put in the stem of whatever grows. The other thing I want to mention is we must get hemp planted everywhere. You could do 3 or 4 harvests, and it's a magical plant that allows you to do fiber. It allows you to do biochar. It is 100% renewable. There are some countries that still outlaw it because it's linked to cannabis. It has nothing to do with cannabis. Legislation has to change everywhere, and hemp is being planted as much as we can, but it must be planted everywhere.
I just
Tierra, you want to say
underline that.
something?
Yeah, so many of the solutions to the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are intertwined. If we protect the places with the most diversity, the rainforest, mangroves, like peat, there's so many ecosystems that sequester so much carbon. Forest, if we leave the mature forest standing, all of those are like natural solutions to help fight climate change. But the biodiversity crisis doesn't get as much attention as the climate crisis. And some people are even saying we can solve the climate crisis, like it's in our power, but we'll still have the biodiversity crisis. And where does it end? We're fighting mining in the States too, especially in Nevada. There's a lot of very endangered plants where they want to extract lithium. But I think about the Lorax a lot and all the stuff that we use all of the time. And when does it stop? When do we realize that we need to change our values and find satisfaction in things other than consumption so that we value the life around us and we don't need endless resources?
I'll also just quickly mention a friend of my wife's, Elizabeth Colbert, won the Pulitzer Prize for the 6th grade Extinction. But David Schwartzman, one of the EcoAction members, a professor at Howard University, emeritus, had a question, one of his key issues. But he mentions that E.O. Wilson and David Attenborough have certainly highlighted the biodiversity crisis, but they have pointed to human population growth as the prime cause, rather than the system of fossil capitalism. Please share your view.
I'll quickly start in saying I'm not a neo-Malthusian. I don't believe in neo-Malthusianism, that we ought to be like 1 billion and that's it. I don't believe in that. I think there's a way for, as Tierra is saying, live differently. Power of example. We've changed the world many times. I use examples. It wasn't the topic tonight, of how we rid ourselves of smoking very fast, how we didn't think same-sex marriage was possible, how cannabis was outlawed. It's now something I can buy down the street from me. Things change much faster than people think. It's always been the work of people like us to try and lead, but not just ourselves. We need to push the mainstream to come toward us, and they will see power of example that things can change. I go back to urban gardens. Who remembers the victory gardens that the US had all over during the 2 wars? No, not that many people do. So it takes passing on the legacy from the giants whose shoulders that we stand on. Let us not forget we descend from a small band of hunter-gatherers in the Rift Valley. I went above the Rift Valley. It is an awe-inspiring sight. People need to connect back to where we come from. And the power of story is what makes us humans. We do not use this enough in our movement. We talk of data. People do not want to hear data. They want to connect. I'm trying to start people of climate change to highlight people. And I'd like to highlight people in Latin America with you, Natalia, with you, Tierra, in the US, that are living climate change right now. And we need to tell their stories. Once we do that, the mainstream will come.
I think
Tierra?
that, go ahead, Natalia.
No,
No, really quickly, just to continue, I completely agree with what Frederic has been saying. It's not an issue of how many of us are in the world, it's an issue of how much we consume. And I think that's very clear. When we talk about it's not climate change, it's system change, I think that's very clear, especially, of course, like the global north has like a rate of consumption that is higher than other places in the world, but other places like India and China are catching up really quickly. And with that amount of population catches up, then we're in big trouble. So the system change needs to go everywhere. And I know that we have a global north in the global south. We have a lot of population here that consumes the same rate as people in the US or in Europe. So it's definitely an issue of how much we consuming and the resources that we're taking off, and not necessarily about the amount of people. And even if that's happening, I feel that everybody is like more conscious about how many children they bring to the world. But anyhow, I feel that the discussion is to go towards another place that is a more uncomfortable place for some people, that is like how much you consume, and when it touches your consumption and your lifestyle, that needs to be changed. And as you're saying, that change can come very fast, whether we like it or not. What happened with the pandemic showed that a rapid response from the whole world can happen. Unfortunately, that global pandemic that response didn't understand that the global pandemic came because we were exceeding the limits of what we're doing with nature, and we ended up using more plastic and more masks and more things to pollute the world. But I feel that the response, a rapid response from the world, demonstrates that we can definitely do that. So if we can do that for climate change, then like as I remember someone saying, we're not a failed species, we're just doing things wrong.
What she said. And because all of the cumulative actions add up as individuals, what we eat, what we wear, how we move around the world, all of these things do add up, and it absolutely is about consumption. And just like we have a carbon footprint, we have an extinction footprint. And wealthier nations, we export our extinction footprint by bringing in palm oil, by bringing in cattle that were grown in the Amazon. And yeah, so I saw someone put the IPAT formula in the chat: impact equals population times affluence times technology. And we have a population and sustainability program at the center focused on these issues to help people think about these things and to talk about consumption. We give away these really cute packages of endangered species condoms just to start these conversations.
Another question.
And I want to react.
Okay.
I want to react to one comment that was just made by Grace. The fact that we need to concentrate leaving habitat for species, urban sustainability. Yes, 100%, because that's why I talk about greening cities, because we must to cool them down. Green roofs everywhere, nature everywhere, and we are going to be, before the century is over, 80 to 85% in urban settings anyway. So what we must do is indeed leave the rest as it is as much as possible. And I'll finish by saying one very interesting idea that came out from President Lula when he was just reelected is to band together the efforts to protect the equatorial forests worldwide. So I'm also looking for people to work with me on making sure things at the Forest Summit in Gabon will happen positively and will not be extractivist. But the idea that Lula put forward to make sure that Brazil and other countries of the Amazon work together, the 6 countries in Central Africa and Indonesia together, makes a ton of sense. It has not been supported enough in the global north and absolutely must.
So Jack Hammond posed a question that the 30 by 30 goal to protect 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. How is that actually supposed to work? How do we get there?
That's a very good question. So I asked that very question to my Minister of the Environment, Stephen Gilbo, who negotiated the 30 by 30 with China for the rest of the world and did good work, let's be clear. His answer was interesting. There's money left over from our Canadian budgets that he wants to devote to urban parks. And he asked myself and others to send him more projects, which we're doing. And in 3 days, I'm already getting call outs for more urban parks to be set up in Vancouver on the other side of the country. So all this can be done worldwide. That is, go into action mode and force politicians to make quick decisions, because we all know what must be done. It is not possible for them to sit by and wait for someone else to save us. No, we are the ones we are waiting for. No one is saving us but ourselves. But it's pressuring, but being positive. If you tell people that the 30 by 30 is a loss, it's difficult. If you tell them that it's actually, as both my co-panelists are saying, it's a way to live better, and there are ways to demonstrate that, it's that much easier to get the voters and the public opinion with you, and the politicians will follow.
Anybody else wish to add anything to that?
Just that
Okay.
30 by 30 is a short-term goal. It's a stepping stone to half Earth.
Barbara writes, how do we change sort of the dominant trophy culture, lawns and hunting for trophies, that do not care about biodiversity or nature rights? How do we, I guess, get the average person to more, you know, I don't need to have a nice green lawn. Frederic?
So I work with people in Arizona that are within an organization called CAVU, and they've looked at water consumption. The city of Phoenix has made it very expensive to water your lawn. So what do you know? People think it's too expensive. They think that cacti are nice, and they don't like lawns anymore. That's how you do it. Our example, and hit the wallet.
I chase my neighbors around with plants, with milkweed and flowers and tomato plants. They pretty much duck in their house when they see me coming, but it's just conversation by conversation.
Yes, I agree. I feel that the change can come from everywhere and with like many like small actions. But I think that the problem is that we're running out of time. I think those all like small actions are valuable and we need to do them. I'm not saying no, we all have to do them. But I think that right now we're running out of time. Like we need to scale them up, and governments need to be like acting quicker. And unfortunately, what we see in like the, you know, like the US not signing the UN convention, and like, you know, although we have a lot of very my light went off, very aware citizens, the country needs to like do something. So I just feel that we need to be taking it somewhere else, since like we are running out of time. That's my sense.
Yes, I know a lot of communities, unfortunately, at least in North America, United States, you know, penalize homeowners or residents who, you know, try to plant wildflowers or a wild garden on their front lawn. That's not what they want for their suburban communities. I was going to ask Tony to answer, to raise this question, but he seems to have disappeared, but he did write it in the chat. So Tony's question is, we cannot solve the problems of the environment if we cannot end imperialism. The economies of the richer nation rest upon the often brutal exploitation. Tony, you there? You want to ask your question? If you do, you got to come off of mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you were doing a great job. You were doing a great job. So basically, I was just saying, you know, if we're talking about people, planet, and peace, we have to, you know, realize that we have a whole planet of people. And so I think Mark was doing a good job of just raising my question, the fact that, you know, if we can't begin to solve global inequity, if we can't begin to solve the fact that, you know, our system is, you know, rests upon right now the brutal extraction of resources and exploitation of labor of mostly the global South, but everywhere, then we're going to have a hard time coming together as a planet to solve our own extinction. What do our panelists have to say towards that, or what kind of work have you or collaborations have you done towards that?
I really like the concept. I don't know if you've heard of that, the concept of the grid line. I feel it's very interesting to introduce the concept of the grid line, because instead of talking about the poverty line, we're talking about the grid line. Like a society needs to condemn those people that have, that are excessively multimillionaires. You don't need that much money. You don't need those that much resources and that much concentration of wealth. So I feel that if we are thinking about like equality and redistribution of wealth, we need to start thinking of like, we don't only need to solve, the crisis of like people that are under the poverty line, but we also need to focus, and the society needs to condemn those people going over the grid line. So I think that's a very powerful idea. And of course, like imperialism is part of that, like the idea of just like concentration of wealth and like market-driven solutions and so on. I can go on for a long time, but I just wanted to introduce the concept of the grid line that I feel is really, really interesting.
I love
Thank
that.
you, Natalia. Oh, I just wanted to mention, before you go, Tierra, the addition of the cost to biological diversity and climate of war. You're speaking of Green Line, and you're speaking of these issues when we're actually accelerating our carbon budget and our destruction of our environment. So if we can add that to these last few comments, I think that would be very helpful. That was put in the chat. Thanks.
I was just going to talk about exploitation for a minute, the exploitation of people in nature. I read a paper that said 1,000 multinational corporations are responsible for 80% of climate emissions. And so as consumers and just as people on this planet, if we work to hold those corporations accountable and to change values, which is all that this is really about, is like a transformation of values where we value the life of nature and also the people we share the planet with, so that we're making choices that aren't driving that exploitation. And it is an uphill battle, but when we say that we're powerless and we can't do anything, then we're just giving those 1,000 corporations free rein to keep screwing over the entire planet.
100%. When I gave a talk at the McGill Environment Society, this came up, and I always ask when I give my talk, what are you doing right now to change your immediate environment and the way you consume? Every hand went up when I asked who buys secondhand. Every hand. So that's a powerful signal. And if you ask people in the younger generations, they all do that. Very seldom do they overconsume. Number one, because most of them are much poorer than their parents were at the same age, let's be clear, even in the global north. But it's also become very mainstream to consume less, and they're okay with it. They're driving cars later, if at all. And this has a severe impact and a positive impact. The same I saw in the chat, there was a mention of if we stopped eating meat the way we eat, we would take care of great many things, because animals eat a lot of soy that is grown where? In the Amazon region. So everything is linked. Too few people connect these dots because it's complex. That's why I spend a lot of time with the system dynamics people, because that's the way they think, and it's a really refreshing view. And I'm helping them translate that into sort of non-geeky, but very mainstream, and it's interesting. So I would end by saying the 30 by 30, like you said earlier, it is non-binding. It is only a stepping stone. It is a step in the right direction. It's 82 months away. There is a momentum. I'll say that there will be a public announcement soon that we will have a version of the last COP this summer in Canada to go into action mode. It hasn't been put in stone yet, but it's in the works. So if people are interested in participating, let me know. I'll put my address again. It's going to be fully dedicated to, okay, we have the framework, we have the 30 by 30, 82 months from now till then, what do we do?
So we're a little bit after 9 at this point, so I think we're going to wrap up and maybe ask each of the panelists to give a couple of closing remarks. We will be compiling information from each of the panelists and sharing that both with everybody here tonight and everybody who pre-registered for the event. We'll probably end up asking Lizzy. I know Lizzy's compiled and she's been posting, links to actions that people can take on the biodiversity and the rights of nature issue. I will mention again that EcoAction meets the second Monday of each month at 8 o'clock. And one of the things we'll be pushing right now is the Earth Day to May Day organizing activity. Who would like to go first as our closing remarks? Go in reverse order of the speakers. Natalia.
Sure. Yeah, just by closing up, I will just like to say, well, Lizzy had shared with us one of the questions about like what some of the memorable moments of the rights of nature. I didn't want to let that pass before closing. I just wanted to share that for me, it was remarkable to have the moment of the Ecuadorian Constitution where we had more than 30 shamans, spiritual leaders coming together in the Constitutional Assembly, bringing on the spirit of nature for that a constitutional recognition of nature as a subject of rights that for us changed the whole path of of our work. Sorry, a little one that is falling asleep here with me. Then the other thing that I wanted to share with you was, of course, like those 30,000 people who proposed and supported the Universal Declaration for the Rights of Mother Earth, the Los Cedros case. And also I wanted to share with you that last year, Europe had its first ecosystem granted rights. That is the case of Mar Menor in Spain. So I just wanted to share with you the hope and end up with this idea of how much is this growing, how many rivers are being granted rights, how many people are recognizing this, how many people are getting empowered by the idea of recognizing that their ecosystems have rights and pushing this into their local authorities and governments. So I just wanted to bring this up by saying how the movement has grown, how I feel that there is a lot of hope. And I feel that the hope comes from civil society, that the push comes from civil society, but we need to be more emphatic about the fact that governments need to change and need to really push in all those big corporations to make the change that we need because we are running out of time. So I think that with that end note, I will just like to thank all of you guys for hosting this really beautiful webinar and really open up the door to work more closely. In the US, you guys have more than 100 ordinances that recognize the rights of nature. And there's a really growing movement in North America around the rights of nature. So I'd love to keep connected with you guys in this amazing idea of the rights of nature.
Tierra?
I mean, there's so much momentum right now. Just like Natalia said, we have like 2 years to get to peak fossil fuel and then get off fossil fuels to save life on this planet. But if we all take action, I'm hopeful that we can do that just because there is so much momentum and that hope is action at this point.
And Frederic?
What a great combination. Hope is action. I love that. I'm going to repeat that and quote you. For all the faults that many people in the climate movement and in the biodiversity protection movement find for the COPs, again, I saw a real connection across continents, across social strata, across business, academia. It's past time, but it's still time. and action every day, everywhere, 82 months. Think of what you can do. And like we said at the beginning, write your Congress person, show up to the town halls. They need to see you. Online is great. We're doing this. This is wonderful, but you need to show up in the real world. That's what counts.
And I said Lizzy's going to give us a little bit of an action, and we'll come back. And also, I should recognize Dawn Marie is our other co-chair if she wanted to say anything, and then if Tony is national co-chair wanted to say something. So Lizzy, you want to kick off the closing part?
Sorry about that. I was muted. I did share the actions in the chat a few times, and we do hope that you will join us with EcoAction. And you can contact our co-chairs at ecoaction-cochairs@gp.org. And you can check out the registration for Global Greens Congress, Korea. That's happening June 8th to 11th. The next steps for the Cutting Montreal Agreement, we're looking forward to hearing more from Frederic on, and you can look at the document. That link is posted in the chat, and his Climate Action Works is fascinating. There's so much there for you to become educated on and take with you. Center for Biological Diversity is telling Biden to take bold action for endangered species. This is the Endangered Species Act 50th anniversary this year. So you go to that link in the chat, biodiversity.us, yeah, join the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. That's GARN, GARN.org. They also have a youth hub. We would love to see young Greens and young environmental minded people joining the garnyouth.org effort. So you can learn more about the UN Harmony of Nature initiative and that with harmonywithnature.un.org, and other actions in the chat and that our speakers have listed. We are going to post with our when we repost the video for resharing, and we'll send it to Dawn Marie. Thanks.
I just want to quickly say, since we mentioned the Center for Biological Diversity, a lot of times EcoAction talks about the whole campaign about climate emergency and climatepresident.org. And that's certainly something that the Center for Biological Diversity has been one of the leaders on. Dawn Marie or Tony, you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you once again for everyone being here to help us talk about this most important issue tonight, and that everything that we do does make a difference. Keep growing those gardens and keep making this planet greener and encouraging our biodiversity in every way we can. Over.
Thank you, Dawn Marie. My only thing that I'd have to say is that, our panelists who said we don't have time, that's what really needs to be underscored. And I know we tell each other that a lot as Greens, but I think we just always have to remind ourselves of that. We don't have a planet B. So this underscores the importance of not only individual action, but also us coming together, organizing, and the importance of independent political politics that really shapes the rest of the political spectrum. So even if you feel as though we are small, our ideas are absolutely massive and actually are the majority. We have the majority in support of peace. We have the majority in support of universal health care. We have the majority in support of ending the war on drugs. And we have the majority in support of having a planet for our next generation to come. So let's all support, no matter who you are working for right now. definitely support our independent voice if we can at the greenpartygp.org. I had an easier email than the one I always forget, the co-chair EcoAction. So we created Earth Day at gp.org. It goes to the same folks. And that's also if you want to volunteer for EcoAction, you can eventually be appointed by your state party or your or a caucus, but you can absolutely volunteer. We need volunteers very much in our committee. So please join us, and thank you so much for coming all out tonight.
Right. And I'll just end with that one. I certainly thank Lizzy. You've really been pushing the party on the whole issue of rights of nature and really made us focus on that. And then Holly Hart, who is the G up there on the screen, and she's been helping us out with the webinar. So thank you all. We will be sending a recording and posting this, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.